Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Eric Weiss. I am the VP of Customer Success at Uplogix. We've been deploying cellular solutions at Uplogix for the past 10 years. And so when my marketing people asked me, they said, what do you think about doing a webinar? I didn't want to do the standard webinar and just sort of talk about our product. I wanted to talk about something that's relevant to a lot of people. And a lot of people are moving towards cellular solutions these days. So I was thinking this might be great if we talked about some of the things, could leverage what we've seen out in the marketplace and help you grow from our experience. So hopefully, if you're new to Uplogix, you'll learn a little bit about our product. If you have Uplogix deployed on your network and are considering moving to cellular, hopefully you'll learn some things that can make it a little bit easier for you. And even if you have cellular, perhaps I'm going to present something that you weren't aware of when you built your solution. Cellular out-of-band is something that works great. It is the solution that we prefer at Uplogix. It's easy, to deploy in mass. The results are excellent. It's sort of the wave of the future. Previously, people used PSTN lines. Those are getting more expensive. It's getting harder to find RAS servers and dial-up solutions. So once you get a cellular solution working, life is good. The trick is getting it to work. And there's a lot of decisions to be made along the way, and it can slow down a deployment. It can make sort of, a tangled web that we weave. What I'm hoping that we can do is, since we've been thinking about this, as I said, for 10 plus years, we've done as much with our product as we can to make it as simple for you. And so the other side of it is, hopefully for those of you who have worked with Uplogix, you know that if you pick up the phone, send an email, we are here for you. And we will always get back to you, if not pick up the phone instantly. Because our focus is making it easy for you, and we really want to help you get this stuff deployed. It's in all of our best interest. So what you really need to get a cellular solution deployed is you need a plan that works with your organization. And 4 things that you need to consider when planning a cellular solution. First is, just the basics of coverage. And that depends on a lot of things, and we'll go through there, contracts, locale, etc. The next is, okay, once you pick your plan, how do you connect to a device once you put it on somebody's cellular network? And there are a lot of different options, and this is probably the heart of what we're going to talk about today, because it's here that it really becomes organizationally specific on what works best for your organization. And then, believe it or not, I want to spend just a few minutes talking to you about how do you buy a cellular plan. Lately, I have seen a number of deployments just slow down when they go get their corporate plan, and the options seem to be overwhelming. They start buying the wrong stuff. So hopefully we can protect you from that. And then finally, the most important thing about any out-of-band solution is reliability. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how you would go about testing reliability, what we've built into our product to test reliability for you. But before I jump into these 4, in case there are people on the line who aren't familiar with Uplogix architecture, I'm going to spend about a minute here just sort of showing you what we call our standard build slide here, where you have an Uplogix local manager. This is our console server. It connects to the various console ports or serial ports of the device being managed. We have our in-band, where we'll just sit on the same network segment as the equipment that we're managing. So in that scenario, users can SSH over the network into us and get console connections to the devices as if they had their Cisco Blue cables plugged into it. At wherever you're running your NOC things out, your NOC tools, your network management, your heads-up displays, we have our control center, which is our element manager for our Uplogix. This is the thing that sees all Uplogix deployments and integrates with the rest of your management tool set. So the thing that makes Uplogix different than other console servers is we have the ability to issue commands and actually take automated actions. So we will continually query the devices connect to us over the console port by default every 30 seconds. And we will also check in with our control center every 30 seconds to let you know if anything has happened. Now, if you think about out of band that people are familiar with, old school PSTN lines using analog phone lines. Usually if there was a problem at a site, a user would grab a laptop with a modem on it, or they'd connect to some RAS server and they would dial directly into their console server or maybe into a modem in the back of a router. Well, that paradigm changes in the cellular world because we're not talking about a circuit switch network anymore. We're talking about a packet switched. And we're talking about turning a cell modem on is like turning an iPad on. It just goes and connects to the network. So you need to deploy a slightly different paradigm. And that's what we're going to be talking about here today. So going back to our original 4 things, we start out with coverage. So a lot of times people say, well, which provider should we use? And that's really up to you. Sometimes, we find that you get better coverage from one provider in certain locales and than other locales. Uplogix is provider agnostic. We can support a multi-provider environment, but you need to know these things up front before you make a lot of decisions on how to design this solution. What I would say that if you're going international and you're going to have sites in Mexico and maybe Canada, you shouldn't probably go for, or Europe or Asia, a single provider solution. In that case, the multi-provider solution makes the most sense because you can use Rogers in Canada and Telmex or Alara in Mexico, Telstra in Australia, etc. One thing to realize is not all providers use the same types of networks, and not all 4G is the same, or not all LTE is LTE. It's a spec. So it is good to know who the providers are. One of the expertise we have is we can tell you, okay, that's running on this type of network. We do have some worldwide certified modems that will run on HPSA plus GPRS, GSM types of networks for you. So now that we covered, sort of provider coverage, what about actual no coverage? If you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, there's nothing I can do for you that's going to get you a cell signal. If you're in the mountains and you do not have line of sight to any cell tower and you're miles away, you probably have no coverage. In those scenarios, you need a different option. You either need to keep your PSTN lines, or you can go to a satellite solution, whether it's low Earth orbit or a geosynchronous satellite. We support both at Uplogix. You could also, if there are cable modems available, you can go that route as well. The more interesting situation is the situation of low coverage. We've all been there where we go into, our IDF or whatever, and it's basically in the basement or a dungeon. And, outside we were in the parking lot, our cell phones worked great, but we get no signal inside the building. So historically, what we've done is we always ship our modems with a mag mount antenna that is a high gain antenna. If that did not get you the signal strength needed, we could ship you a second antenna. And it turns out if you mount 2 antennas at right angles about a foot apart, that is the ideal configuration for picking up, the electromagnetic spectrum that the cell network runs on. So that could increase your sort of sensitivity, anywhere from 20 to 50%. But that still might not be enough in all situations. And there's been situations where we've had to use super high gain, like Yagi antennas, and they've done fairly well getting into these, sort of deep penetration sites. But that's a much more expensive solution, but it's cheaper than the alternative of actually having an engineering project and running a cable, outside and mounting an antenna on the roof. But what we're really excited about is, due to the Internet of Things, people have been thinking about, this machine to machine. There are a lot of things with embedded cell modems these days that need to be talking to each other. And they've come out with a new class of sort of low power, lower speed modems that are designed for deep penetration. So, they're called, one of them type is called Cat M1 modems. And at Uplogix, we've had our elves busy in the workshops trying to certify these. And what's great about the Cat M1 modems is they run on LTE networks. They're low power, low frequency, low bandwidth. They only run at speeds of up to 375 kilobits per second, both up and down, and at half duplex. But what's nice is they sort of run with a very tight bandwidth at the low end of the spectrum, and that's how they get to deep penetration at 1.4 megahertz, opposed to standard what we think of as LTE or 4G, 150 megabits per second down, 50 megabits per second up, and that's at the max. That's using the full 20 megahertz operating bandwidth. But these Cat M1 modems definitely are looking like that is a great solution. As I said, our elves have been working on it. We have been testing them in various basements, inside garbage cans, things like that. So far, everything is looking really good. We're hoping to have them certified early in 2020 and available for purchase. So that's one of the situations of low bandwidth. The other situation of low bandwidth is I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And this is a case study that we did with a company, Wind Energy of Texas, that's actually located right here in Austin with us. But they have all these windmills out in West Texas, the middle of nowhere. Closest cell towers are anywhere from 5 to 15 miles away. So we started thinking about, well, there should be cell signal, but not enough to pick up. But we sort of used a combination of these Yagi directional antennas. We equipped the installers with a compass, and on our end, we used Google Earth. And what we did was we went and we said, okay, where is our cell site? So circle that on Google Earth. Then we said, where are the closest towers? And as you can see, there's actually a tower right over here by us, and there was another tower here. We chose the second tower in the end, because when we circled that tower, what happened is once we knew both towers, we could say, oh, let's see, our site is at 2,700 feet. The tower height is only at 2,600, but it's 150 feet high, so we should have 50 feet of clearance, assuming nothing's in the way. So we plotted on a map down here, here's our height, and then we took the layout of all the land between us and the tower, and the tower height is way down here, but you can see, or the land is down here, and we wouldn't have been able to get a signal to it, but the 150 feet got us up to here. We had straight line of sight, it worked. So when the installer went out, we said, plug the Uplogix in, plug the Yagi antenna in on a pole, aim it at 315 degrees heading, and sure enough, we could see it in the control center. Well, this is a kind of cool example of, if you're deploying out in an oil field, the same things happen inside cities. You can point from the top of a building to a cell tower the same way. So that kind of handles the low coverage, no coverage. But let's talk about connecting to the cellular network itself. And the way that you connect to the cellular network is, your cellular modem turns on and the radio goes out and it basically hits an APN. It registers with an access point. And what the access point is, it's a gateway between the radio network, the mobile network, and a standard IP computer network. Most providers have several APNs, and it is one of the things that when you shop for your plans, you're going to have to take into account. What type of APN are you getting? They have provider APNs that will give you DHCP addresses. There are provider APNs that will allow you to reserve a set of static IP addresses. There are also private APNs, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But let's look at how something connects out in this world. So here you have your Uplogix with its cellular modem. It turns on its radio, it hits the cellular network. The APN says, okay, I'm going to register you. Once it registers it, it gives it an IP address. Now you have your console server, which has access to your network gear, sitting out on the network. So the question is how do you connect to it at that point? But before you even have that question, it's the real question that comes up is, hey, is this cool with your security team? And after doing this for several years and having people test solutions during POCs and stuff, and they're about to implement something, then security comes in. it is really important to work with your security team during planning for this. There are a lot of options that they probably will be interested in. So, I just want to throw that out there. The first thing you need to figure out is, are you going to go for a DHCP solution or a fixed IP solution? And sometimes that depends on what's available. You might be deploying stuff in India and only get DHCP. So if you have only a DHCP solution, there's a couple things that you need to think about. How are you going to know what the IP address that this thing comes on line when it always comes out of band? So whatever your solution that you go for has to take that into account. We have several solutions available for you that can help with that. Or do you want a fixed IP? I would say you always want to go with a fixed IP if you can, because it's great to know, what the address of your out-of-band things are when they're out of band. And I talked a little bit more about, IP addresses before. Do you want a public IP address, or do you want to find a way to bring it back into your network and have a private IP address? Again, there's several ways, and this is going to be sort of the meat of today's talk. So before we do that, there's one other thing that we really need to consider, and that is, how are you going to turn on the out-of-band? Do you want to leave it always on and have your stuff sitting out on the network? That's an option. You can have it just turn on automatically when the network fails. This is what we prefer at Uplogix. You can also have it on demand, which says when you tell it to turn on. Someone may say, how do you tell it to turn on when the network's down? One of the things that we've done is we've built in a way that you can send it a SMS message from the control center or another a secure message, and it will turn on because it received that. But let's look at this sort of how do you automatically turn on when the network fails? We've built into the Uplogix solution a feature that we call Pulse. And really all that is an echo service running on port 7, TCP port 7. You could change the ports if your security team wanted to. And so what will happen is the Uplogix local manager will send out an echo to 3 different places in your network. You can pick where your Pulse servers are located. And as long as one of those gets back, we're going to say, hey, this is great, the network is up and running. But if you get to such a time as something happens, your router goes down, you have a cut, out there in your line, and we don't get the pulse back, well, we'll try again. And after 2 or 3 bad pulses, we will turn on the out-of-band connection automatically. When we turn the out-of-band connection, we will connect out, get an IP address. We're going to talk about where that IP address is and how to get there in just 1 second. But once we have an IP address, the user then can come in and SSH from their computer, get access to the remote site. The remote site at when such a time as they bring the network back up. And so we see that Pulse is actually working again, and 5 minutes has passed, then we'll tear down that out-of-band connection automatically. This is a great solution for people who are doing things that are saying, hey, we're going to have a public IP address, and you only have things out connected to the cellular network for really the most minimal amount of time that you would need it. And it's not a cost thing. It's you don't want to have your things sitting out on the public internet where every bot and every hacking program is coming back at you any longer than you want. So it brings up the next sort of thing. What do you want? Private IP addresses or public IP addresses? We have found ways to secure both for you. And this again, really it's a tug of war. It depends on your security team, your team itself. What do you have access to? We have the ability from the Uplogix local manager that when the local manager comes online, it can build an IPsec tunnel back to a VPN concentrator on your site. This is a great solution for if you're using multi-provider stuff or even maybe not everything is going to be cellular, maybe some of it's going to be cable modems. The idea is you don't care, it gets assigned a public IP address, it builds a VPN tunnel, it logs in through the VPN tunnel. There are very few ports you have to open up. You have to open up 8443 for heartbeat. You want to let 22 out so your people can connect to it. You will probably want to open up whatever you're running your TACX or multi-factor authentication on if you go for that. There's another solution that's even that a lot of people like, which is the use of private APNs. The big cell companies in the United States, at least, offer the concept of what they call a private APN or a private VPN. And basically, when your cell modem connects online and the SIM card gets an requests an IP address, it sees the SIM card. It also sees the APN as your private APN name that it's registering to. And it will assign you an address on your network, and it will build the VPN sort of behind the scenes. So all you need to do is put in the SIM card. What's great about that is every device that comes online just looks like another endpoint on your MPLS. It's a harder solution if you're going to be using multi-providers. It also does cost a little more because there's a one-time setup fee. Some users and some companies that we've worked with actually like just to have their devices connect out onto the internet, and they'll use local passwords. And their philosophy is, we're using our break glass password. We're only connecting to the network when needed. We don't have to worry about our corporate network being up. The whole thing can be down and we can rebuild it. Obviously, if you're doing that, you really want to use a feature like Pulse. You want to use a feature like Pulse for sure, and you probably want to change those passwords. We've tried to work with security teams and getting a little bit smarter about this, and so we've come up with one more solution for public IP addresses that's simple to implement and seems to be working great, and that's to basically NAT out the control center IP address and have the local manager build a reverse SSH tunnel to it and then connect through that reverse SSH tunnel. So what does that look like? Here you have your cellular, here you have your Uplogix local manager, your cellular modem. We connect to the network. We get assigned an IP address. In that case, it can be a public IP address. And then what we do is we reach out for the NAT of the control center. Usually we'll build a reverse SSH tunnel. You can pick what port. By default, we'll do it on 2222. But like most things with Uplogix, it's preferenceable. Once we build that and connect to the control center, we can force users to connect to us by only connecting through that reverse SSH tunnel, which means that they need to be able to authenticate in your network. They need to be able to connect to the control center to do that. And it's a great solution. And so they're connecting SSH through a SSH tunnel. Nobody can log into that device any other way. So you stay secure and you're doubly encrypted. Buying a plan. So if you have this, a lot of people are like, great, we're going to deploy this. We'll just call our provider. And next thing you know, your provider is trying to sell you a private APN, but actually not only that, maybe they're trying to sell you an entire out-of-band network that's running on the cellular network, your own private cloud, and all of a sudden you're buying cellular routers, going down the wrong path. The people that you're talking to don't think about out-of-band how you think about it as console connection. When you mention that to them, they may be like, oh yeah, we have some crappy little console server you can throw on as part of this. But that's really not what you need. All you need to implement this plan, to implement a cellular out-of-band strategy with Uplogix is, well, no, the Beatles thought all you need is love. And granted, we all need that, but what you really need is just a data plan like you would get with your iPad. And it's great if you can get it with SMS, if the providers offer that. You can get a shared data plan just like you use with your family. If you get 10 gigabytes a month, like what my family uses, that's good for about 100 Uplogix, because if you think about it, they don't spend that much time out of band. And when you are connecting with them, you're connecting and doing things at 9600 baud. So that's how to buy the cellular network. The last thing really is for those of you who have used out-of-band in your past, we all know the war stories. The most important thing about out-of-band is it there when you need it? Back in the days of old school dial-up, you would dial into the network, dial into it, and you'd find out someone's unplugged it in the fax machine, and you'd have your office moment space, minute moment where you're like, dang, fax machine, just want to destroy it. The worst is when you actually can dial in and you get into the device and you find out that someone else has been inside your IDF, and inside your IDF, they decided to plug their blue cable directly in and they never plugged your device back in. And that's really a frustrating situation. With cellular, there's one more thing that you need to think about, and that is that SIM still turned on? So the way that we've addressed these is on the console connection side. For those of you who use Uplogix and remember the very first slide that I showed, we are constantly talking to the devices connected to us over the console ports. If somebody unplugs them, we will alarm and say they are unavailable. On the cellular side, we do a very similar thing, but what we'll do instead of just testing the cellular modem is at a minimum of once a day, but you can change the frequency, we will actually turn the out-of-band connection on, make sure that it can connect all the way through to the control center, have a successful heartbeat, and tear it down. And if that fails, we'll let you know that it's failed, and then you can call into whoever, you can either troubleshoot it, or you can call into, if your SIM card got turned off, call into whoever manages those accounts and get it turned on, which leads to the very final thing of troubleshooting. Everyone on this line, I'm guessing, is really good with networking, but may not be as familiar with cellular networks and cellular troubleshooting. And, if you guys remember back in the day of V92 modems and stuff, all the AT commands, we don't really expect you to know all that stuff and know all those things for cellular and what to look at for. So what we've done is, since I said at the beginning, we try and make this easy for you. We've built commands that in your language, things like pull tech and show tech. So if you issue a pull tech on an Uplogix modem resource, we will go and interrogate the modem for you. All the things that we would ask you on a support call. And the next thing that we would do is, if you issue show tech, we give you English readable answers to those. So usually the first thing we ask you is, hey, is this thing registered on the home network? Yes or no? If it is registered on the home network, is it actually functioning? Yes or no? If for some reason it isn't, and we find out, that the SIM card isn't turned on, and you call into maybe like Verizon always asks you, what's the IMEI number of the modem? You guys are sometimes remote for that, but we can pull that off for you, get all that information. Probably the next question that we always ask people is the SIM inserted? And we always get that yes, but you'd be amazed at how many times when we check the SIM status where it says, no, it's not inserted. It's not inserted. It's not inserted. And the reason is because they've put it in backwards. Finally, what is the SIM number if you have to turn it back on? What is your operator? And I was talking about this earlier, signal strength. What's the signal strength we're seeing on this cellular signal? And finally, what is my mobile directory number? So at the end of the day, what it comes to is, I'm just about burned out my time here. So, we've been in the trenches, we've walked the twisty paths. We are more than happy to work with you to get you there. We've tried to build as much into our product to make it as easy for you as possible so that your cellular deployments can be as straightforward as possible. And, our big concern and focus is making it easy for you. So thank you guys. My name is Eric Weiss. As I said, I am VP of Customer Success and Sales here at Uplogix. If I don't know you, I look forward to meeting you. If I do know you, I hope, to be working with you guys soon.